So what have been the best westerns released in this decade so far? Well, now that we're at the halfway point, I thought it would be a good time to answer that question by ranking my top 20 best western films and TV shows that released between 2020 and 2025. So kicking us off, we have The Unholy Trinity, an original western movie headed up by Samuel Jackson and Pierce Brosnan. Set in 1870s Montana, the film follows a young man who vows to avenge the death of his father, which leads him to the town of Trinity, where he becomes embroiled with the local sheriff played by Brosnan and a mysterious character played by Jackson. And as you might expect, the pair both deliver compelling performances, really elevating their morally grey characters, in what ends up being a satisfying traditional revenge western that's well worth a watch. At number 19, we have Cry Macho, a 2021 neo-western drama starring the legendary Clint Eastwood, who also directed the movie as well. And in the film, Eastwood plays a washed-up rodeo star who agrees to escort a young boy from Mexico back to his father in the US. And what follows is an introspective, heartwarming road trip movie through the American West, offering a contemplative take on redemption and old age, which really resonates thanks to the committed performance of its 91-year-old star. Next up, we have Surrounded, a 2023 western thriller starring Letitia Wright, disguised as a former Buffalo soldier who finds herself forced into a life-or-death situation with an outlaw after being ambushed during a stagecoach ride. And the movie does a great job of quietly building tension through its minimalist setup, proving to be a well-crafted western that really feels like a throwback, while also offering a fresh perspective and some interesting twists, in a story that has more than a few similarities to 3:10 to Yuma. Now that's not to say it doesn't have its flaws, but it does feel like it's been overlooked as a movie, and it's certainly worth a watch. At number 17, we have The Thicket, a 2024 western starring Peter Dinklage and Juliette Lewis, who both give outstanding performances as two of the most original, offbeat characters to come out of the genre in years, with the plot following a young boy who enlists the help of a bounty hunter to rescue his sister from a violent outlaw in turn-of-the-century Texas. And although The Thicket is a slow burn and can be offbeat at times, it does an impressive job of creating a dark, brooding atmosphere, with some striking cinematography and plenty of memorable characters. Next, we have Butcher's Crossing, starring Nicolas Cage as a grizzled, unhinged buffalo hunter, who takes a wide-eyed Harvard dropout on an ill-fated expedition into the wild frontier. So Butcher's Crossing is a bleak, brutal watch that at times feels like a horror movie, due in large part to a typically bonkers performance from Nick Cage. So if you've ever wondered what the treasure of the Sierra Madre would be like if it were blended with The Revenant, Butcher's Crossing is your answer, and it's well worth checking out. At number 15, we have The Harder They Fall, an action-packed western movie featuring a star-studded cast that sought to unite all the most famous real-life black historical figures from the Wild West in a single film. And on that front, it succeeds, following outlaw Nat Love as he assembles an unlikely crew of famous faces to take down his lifelong foe, Rufus Buck. Now in fairness, the comic book-style story does feel somewhat paper-thin at times, and lacking in focus, due to the sheer amount of characters involved. But otherwise, the film has to be commended for its Tarantino-esque sense of style and pace, boasting some of the most visually striking and stylized cinematography that the genre has ever seen. At number 14, we have Outer Range, a 2022 science fiction neo-western TV show that felt like Yellowstone meets Lost. And fronting the series is Josh Brolin, a rancher who finds his life turned upside down when he discovers an unexplainable black hole on his land, which coincides with the appearance of a mysterious girl who clearly knows more than she's letting on. So Outer Range is one of those shows that has a really strong hook and is easy to get enticed by, thanks to lots of gripping mysteries, interesting characters, and a refreshing blend of genres. However, as satisfying as the first two seasons were, it is very disappointing that Amazon cancelled the show before its time, leaving some of its bigger mysteries forever unsolved. Up next, we have Lawmen Bass Reeves, a Western TV series starring David Oyelowo as one of the first black US Marshals in the American West, who went on to have an incredibly eventful life. And Lawmen Bass Reeves does a really thorough job of exploring that history, detailing his incredible career with plenty of drama and action. It also has a great cast, with a perfect casting for Reeves, as well as a sense of scope and scale that made it feel genuinely cinematic. So at number 12, we have Billy the Kid, a TV show exploring the early life of the titular real-life outlaw. Now, there have obviously been countless movies and TV shows about Billy the Kid in the past, which raises the question of why we would need another one. However, this take on the infamous gunslinger prevails thanks to the detail with which it explores his history, following him from a child to an adult with a nuanced approach that strikes a decent balance between entertainment and historical accuracy. Tom Blythe also makes for a great Billy, putting his own unique spin on the character in what's been a really overlooked, entertaining Western TV show that will appeal to most fans of the genre. Next, we have The Dead Don't Hurt, a 2024 Western starring Vicky Krieps and Viggo Mortensen, who was also the director, and the film is set in the aftermath of the Civil War, following a French woman and a Danish immigrant as they try to carve out a life for themselves on the unforgiving frontier, until unexpected events tear their world apart. So the film does offer its fair share of action and tension, but for the most part it's more of an introspective, non-linear story about love and loss, that thanks to some beautiful cinematography really captures the true, unfiltered experience of what it was like to live on the frontier. At number 10, we have That Dirty Black Bag, a 2022 spaghetti western TV show starring Douglas Booth and Dominic Cooper. Now, if you've never heard of it, you wouldn't be the only one, as the show suffered from a serious lack of marketing. But in essence, the story follows a sheriff with a murky past who becomes embroiled in a deadly cat-and-mouse game with a ruthless bounty hunter, who carries the heads of his victims in a dirty black bag. So true to the spaghetti western genre, the show is gritty, violent and dark, with plenty of morally grey characters, and more than a few nods to Sergio Leone. Now, that's not to say the show is perfect, but there's no question that it deserves more recognition than it got, making it one of the standout hidden gems on this list. At number 9, we have News of the World, starring Tom Hanks as a Civil War veteran who travels from town to town reading newspapers. But this all changes when he unexpectedly encounters a young girl kidnapped by Native Americans, prompting him to undertake a long, perilous journey to reunite her with her family. So News of the World is not without its tense moments, but for the most part, the movie is a heartfelt, poignant story about redemption, but also happens to be a beautifully shot, sweeping western that's definitely worth a watch. At number 8, we have The English, a Western TV show starring Emily Blunt as a woman seeking revenge in the 19th century frontier, who teams up with a Pawnee ex-cavalry scout on a quest for revenge. And as its title suggests, the show actually originated from the UK, which is very unusual, but its unique blend of British sensibilities and Western ingredients make for a truly fresh, well-written take on the genre. It also features a lot of striking visuals and memorable characters, topped off by a typically committed performance from Emily Blunt, and it's probably one of the most overlooked entries on this list. Next up, we have Horizon: An American Saga Chapter 1, starring, funded and directed by Kevin Costner. Now, it's hard to judge what is essentially the first part of a much larger story, but nobody can deny that Horizon Chapter 1 is beautifully filmed, and probably the most epic western to grace the big screen in years. But at times it does feel as if it's a bit too ambitious for its own good, often dragged down by exposition with lots of setup and very little payoff. So hopefully Kevin Costner finds a way to continue the saga, to make good on what is still a very promising first chapter in a much bigger 4-part story. Up next, we have Killers of the Flower Moon, a 2023 Western crime drama from the legendary Martin Scorsese, based on the real-life Osage Nation murders that took place in 1920s Oklahoma. And the director goes to great lengths to tell the full story of this chilling chapter of American history, which, although engrossing, does hurt the pacing at times. But what really makes the movie are the incredible performances from Lily Gladstone, Robert De Niro, and Leonardo DiCaprio, who wholly embody their characters, making Killers of the Flower Moon a brutal, heartfelt movie that really hammers home the horror of the true story behind it. At number 5, we have 1923, a Western drama starring Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren. And the show is actually a prequel to Yellowstone, following the ancestors of the Dutton family during the Great Depression, as they struggle to maintain their ranch against the economic hardships and rising tensions of the time. But the great thing about the show is that you really don't need to have watched Yellowstone to enjoy it, because its 2-season arc feels very much like a standalone story, full of interesting characters and storylines that paint a gritty, brutal picture of what life was like in 1920s Montana. So if you're looking for an epic, big-budget Western TV show, 1923 is a really good pick. At number 4, we have Dark Winds, a 2022 neo-western crime series set in the 1970s Navajo Nation, and the story follows tribal police officers Joe Leaphorn and Jim Chi as they investigate a string of strange crimes that begin to blur the line between the spiritual and the criminal, all while navigating the unique cultural and political tensions of reservation life. So although it doesn't ever quite reach the heights of similar shows that came before like Justified and Longmire, it's certainly doing its best to fill their shoes, with 3 excellent seasons under its belt already, begging the question of why more people aren't talking about it. Up next, we have American Primeval, a 2025 Netflix limited series featuring an impressive cast that's headed up by Taylor Kitsch. Set in the chaotic, unforgiving wilderness of the early frontier, the show follows a capable mountain man who helps a wanted woman on the run with her child against the backdrop of a bloody battle for control of the American West. And the series really doesn't shy away from the brutality and lawlessness of the time, delivering an intense, visceral portrait of that particular period in history, featuring lots of committed performances and impressive action, making American Primeval easily one of the most hard-hitting Western TV shows of the decade so far. So at number 2, we have 1883, a Western TV show that starred Sam Elliott, Tim McGraw, and Faith Hill. And much like 1923, it aimed to act as a prequel to Yellowstone, following the ancestors of the Dutton family as they embark on a dangerous journey westward in search of a better life. But again, you really don't need to have watched Yellowstone to enjoy it, as 1883 proves to be a really inspiring, gripping tale of frontier survival, featuring lots of great characters and powerful moments, while being beautifully shot throughout. So in terms of new Western TV shows, 1883 is up there as a must-watch. And finally, at number 1, we have Old Henry, a 2021 Western film starring Stephen Dorff and Tim Blake Nelson. Now initially, the movie seems like it has a fairly simple premise, given that it all revolves around an isolated widowed farmer and his son who get drawn into a tense standoff with a deadly outlaw, after taking in a wounded man on the run. However, from this basic setup, Old Henry expands into a gripping, masterfully directed piece of storytelling, full of twists and memorable moments, resulting in a deceptively clever film that is far more than the sum of its parts. So in my opinion, of all the westerns to release in this decade so far, Old Henry stands head and shoulders above the rest, and is the one that will most likely be regarded as a classic in the future. But if you disagree, let me know your top pick below, and while you're here, you might also want to check out this video right here.